Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. Today I would like to talk about a recent video made by fellow YouTuber Lindybeige. He talked about a linguistic matter, and as a linguist I thought it would be a good idea to make a response video. So let's get to it. Now, one thing that I would like to say as we start the video is that although I'm going to point out some mistakes that Lindybeige has made in his video, I wish to do this with respect, and I respect the man and fellow YouTuber. And of course, as I do this, I also keep in mind and remember very well that I myself make mistakes, just like anyone does. And for example, and since you know that I do have many videos about history, I often say that I am no historian, I'm no professional historian, I'm just a history enthusiast. However, with languages I am a professional, and there are a few things that I wish to make clear about the concept, particularly having to do with Chinese, that Lindybeige has expressed in his video. Now, before starting, for those who don't know or are here for the first time, I'll just give a little bit of background information about me. As far as languages are concerned, apart from a university degree where I specialized in Oriental language, I also have 10 years of experience with Oriental language, namely Japanese and Mandarin Chinese. And I'm not boasting, I'm only saying this to let you know where the information that I'm about to share with you come from.
Symbols represent not sounds, but meanings. So, for instance, this one represents the concept of big. It's like a man standing like that. It doesn't make the noise big. There's no b-i-g. It's the concept of big.
It is true that a Chinese character has a meaning. So the drawing that you see there, that he has showed you, means big. However, there is a sound linked to that character. For example, in Mandarin Chinese, the character would be read da. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Mandarin Chinese, I'm using a fourth tone or fourth pitch. So that's the way millions of people read it in China. Now, it is true that as that character goes to another part of the ancient empire or another part of China where they speak a different kind of Chinese, they will read it differently. And again, the same character will go to Japan and Japanese will read it differently. But this does not mean that the sound is not linked to the character. It's true that you can read it and understand it even if you don't know how they read it in the other part of the world where you are sending it, that they still use an ideographical system. But the reason why that works is because ideograms and Oriental characters work just like numbers in our language. For example, if I show you this number here, you will read it 4, but you don't have any F-O-U-R. So how do you know? You just know that this grapheme, this symbol, is read 4. You have a mnemonical understanding on how to read it. That is exactly how you read a character. You see this character here, you know that it's read da. The reason why you know it is because you know that it represents the concept of big, and so you read it da. As he said, if this character goes to another part of China, they will read it differently, or if it goes to Japan, they will read it differently, but that's the same thing with this symbol. If this symbol comes to Italy, I will read it quattro. If it goes to France, I'll read it in another way. If it goes to Spain, I will read it in another way, and so forth. Still, communication works. So this is how this whole thing works. It's not only a concept of meaning, but it's also a concept of mnemonic reading.
Unfortunately, there are certain drawbacks to this system, and they're quite significant. So the actual writing is really quite difficult, and try using a typewriter. Good luck with that. And modern computers, how many keystrokes do you need per character? And you want to design a font? How long have you got? Yeah, it's really pretty tricky, whereas we just have to learn 26 letters, capital and lowercase, and a few punctuation marks, and we're away.
He does mention typewriters and computers and how difficult it would be to write a character in a computer because of how complicated and complex they are, and for the amount of strokes and keys that you need to push. But that is absolutely not true. Again, I've been working with this for years, and honestly I can say that when I type on my computer in Chinese or in Japanese, it basically takes me the exact same amount of time that it would if I were writing English or Italian. So let me explain to you how it works and how that could be. When you have a character, for example, like da, the Chinese character for big, the way you write it is you just hear the sound, so you think the sound, which is da. Of course, if you know the language, you know the language, you know that in Chinese to say big, you say da. So you know that it's da, and you just write D-A, just like you would in English, or in Italian in this case. So after you write D-A, you need to push the space bar. As you push the space bar, the computer will select the correct character. Now, most of the times this works. Occasionally you need to push it more than once, as you do have characters that have the same pronunciation in Oriental languages. But even if that happens, you normally are fine within the first 3 to 4 characters that the list gives you. So to write it in English, you write D-A. To write it in Chinese, you write D-A space. That's the only difference. It's like half a second. Of course, you need to be fluent in the language, but that is quite obvious, I believe.
And dictionaries. Try using a Chinese dictionary, but in Chinese, it begins with O. It doesn't begin with anything. So what they do have sort of dictionaries, but they have things collected together in terms of categories. So, for instance, all the animals. So there you go. So you have to look along. So animals. Where are animals? No. Go down a long list. Animals. Page 152. Right. So you go to page 152 and. Nope, that's not the animal I want. Nope, that's not the one animal I want. Nope, not that one, not that one, not that one. And eventually you'll find aardvark, which was the one you were after, and the symbol for it. So yeah, lots of big drawbacks of Chinese.
Vocabulary. Here is another huge misunderstanding. It is, okay, if vocabularies worked the way you mentioned, Lindybeige, no one would ever try to use a vocabulary, not even a mother tongue. But luckily they don't work that way. Now, it's true that you have thousands of characters and that they are divided into, for example, semantic categories, so as you mentioned, animals, for example, and, for example, water. You have many possibilities, people, but you also have subcategories. Now, what is essential to understand how to find a character quickly using a dictionary, a Chinese or a Japanese dictionary, is that you need to know how to write it properly. You need to know the exact number of strokes you need to write the character, which is something that you do learn as you start learning Oriental languages. So, for example, in your case, the way you wrote the character for da was not correct.
This one,
because you first drew the horizontal line and then with only one stroke you draw the rest of the character. That is not correct. The way you actually write that character is first a horizontal line, then 1, 2. So the overall amount of strokes will be 3. 1, 2, 3. That is incredibly important, because as you learn the exact number of strokes, and please let me tell you that you don't need to learn it for all the thousands of characters, there are some rules. As you learn the rules with a little bit of experience, you will be able to know how many strokes are needed for any character, even for the very complex one, by yourself. So you don't need memory here, you just need to know the rules. As you know the rules, and you know that it's 3 strokes, you will look for their characters among the 3-stroke based characters in the dictionary. That makes it incredibly simple to find. A lot easier than the way you depict it, which is not the way you read a dictionary. Another thing, for more complex characters, you have what's called a radical. A radical is a under-segment of the character which contains the semantic field. For example, this is the character, at least the radical version of the character for water. As you can see, just a little 3 drops of water. All right. Now, all the characters that have to do with liquids or water in general will have this radical. So as you're reading Chinese, you find a character you don't know, you can immediately identify the semantic field, water. So you look for water section of the dictionary. And again, where do you find it among so many sections? It's got 3 strokes. It's always the same concept. So you find it, you open it. Now there are many possible characters which have the radical water. How do you find it? You need to know how many strikes are needed for the second half of the character. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So water plus 5. You can immediately spot it. There aren't that many water plus 5. In this case, you will see that the meaning is to cry, because it's standing with water, which in Chinese means crying, also in Japanese. So again, I'm not saying it's simple. Of course it's not. It's an Oriental language, but it is possible, and it's a lot easier than the way you pointed out. That is not how you use a Japanese or Chinese vocabulary. Now, having said this, with English...
Sometimes I feel sorry for foreigners trying to learn English. No, really I do. It's because our spelling is just so mad, isn't it? And loads of people complain about it. I mean, why is this word choir? Why isn't it choir or schwa or something? But no, it's choir, and you've just got to know that. And so when you learn a new word in English, you have to learn its spelling almost as a separate thing from the sound and the meaning. It's another thing you have to cope with, and as you're learning a new language, that's a burden, and I'm terribly sorry. However, I am here to say that despite what you might think, actually English spelling is a really good system, possibly even the best system around, possibly even the best possible system. So just think what the world would be like if English had only started to be written down now, and so a Geordie wrote down what he was saying phonetically like this.
I'm going to a paper place on my Kawasaki motorcycle for some create paper.
And then someone from Oxford wrote down what he was saying like this.
I'm going to paper place on my Kawasaki motorcycle for some crepe paper.
On the page they would look so different that you might think they are two different languages. But in fact, English is united by derivative spelling. We can have people saying it all sorts of different ways all the way around the world, and yet we all understand each other written on the page. Isn't that great?
Now, you do mention the fact that you think that English has got probably the best possible system as far as spelling is concerned. I don't agree. Also, because the way you back it up is that you make it sound as if it wasn't like that, then a Yorkshire person, a person from Yorkshire, or a Geordie would pronounce it one way and therefore spell it in a certain way. So the fact that English has got its own strange way of spelling, at least, which is not coherent with the actual pronunciation, is the only way it could have possibly worked. That is not true. The reason why English is the way it is not because of this, but it's because of what it's called, linguistically speaking, GVS, or Great Vowel Shift. Let me give you a little bit of background on this linguistic concept. Alright, so GVS, Great Vowel Shift. I will just mention a few things about this, and then if you want, I can go deeply into this subject and this topic in a dedicated video. Consider that I normally teach this always to my students when I teach English. So, GVS, Great Vowel Shift. It is because of GVS that we have many peculiarities in English spelling. What happened is that all Middle English long vowels changed their pronunciation in England between 1350 and 1700. Now, the reason why the spelling is peculiar and it's not coherent is because spelling was starting to become standardized in the 15th century. So spelling is linked to the way things were pronounced before the Great Vowel Shift. In other words, they decided and standardized and fixed spelling in a coherent way, but then vowels changed. So before the GVS, before this 1350, English did have a very coherent pronunciation and spelling, a lot closer to how Italian and other continental languages are. Now, let me give you some examples of this. For instance, the word bite, we see that the I is indeed pronounced I, but then some other times it's pronounced like in sit. Well, in late Middle English, before GVS, it was pronounced E. So you would read it beat all the time. So very similar to Italian and Spanish and so forth. Again, meat was read E, so mate. Mate was read a, mat. You didn't have the problem of a, but sometimes a, like in mate and cat. Ow was read oo, so not out, but oot. If you have experience with English or if you have mother tongue, you will notice that some northern pronunciations do have this sound. And for example, even in Scotland, I believe. Oo in boot was pronounced o, so two o's, just o, so bought. You still have this sound in modern English with all double O's that are followed by an R, so door and floor. But you lose it in other words, for example, moon and blood. However, if you read Shakespeare, you will notice that they were supposed to rhyme. So from this we can see that moon and blood, which in modern English don't rhyme, used to rhyme because they were read morn and blood. Now, another interesting curiosity is that, yes, in modern English, bite, I, is pronounced I. However, in early modern English, all the way up to the 16th century, the I sound was actually a sound. So if you're familiar with a Scottish accent where people say scape for Skype, for example, and race for rice, then you do know where that comes from. They actually being conservative. So that is the actual reason why English is not coherent. Now, what would have happened if they actually started writing in a more coherent way? It would have happened what happened in Italy. Now, in Italy, we also have regional variations of accent and pronunciation. As a matter of fact, our regional variations are a lot worse and different than the ones you have in England. Because again, in England, occasionally you have a different word between north and south, for example. Bother, mither, etc. But most of the times it's just a matter of pronunciation. Occasionally you do, but most of the time it's a matter of pronunciation. Up, pub, pub, etc. Now, in Italian, Italy has been a country for just 150 years. So what that means is that each region has got its own dialect. And when I say dialect, I'm saying that if I speak Sicilian and my father speaks its own dialect, which is from the northeast of Italy, what we say will be completely unintelligible. I will not have a clue what he's saying and he will not have a clue what I am saying. So considering this basis, how do we communicate? We all know Italian, so we can say that people who speak dialects in Italy are bilingual. So we know the dialect and we know standard Italian. For me, they're both my first language. However, when someone reads Italian and he's from Rome, from Florence, from Milan, and from Naples and from Palermo, they will all have different accents, but the spelling will still be very coherent. As a matter of fact, there can be no spelling context in Italy because everyone would win. Instead, in England, it's a huge problem knowing how to spell specific words, and many words can be a problem to spell, even otherwise you wouldn't have those contexts at school. We never have. It would make no sense in Italy. Even an illiterate Italian knows how to spell most words. There are just a couple of words in Italian that are kind of strange, and GN, GLI occasionally are a bit strange, but most of the time the vowel sound A will always be pronounced A, the vowel sound O will always be pronounced O. We do have different variations of O, so O and O in standard Italian, but you still spell it the same way. In English, O can be read U, can be read A like in love, can be read O like in copy. There are a lot of possibilities. Can be read O like in go. So there are a lot of possibilities and it's a lot less coherent. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and hello to Lindybeige, and keep up the good work. I still love and enjoy your content. Thank you for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.